Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show that talks about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I hope you'll join me as I chat to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation over in the Let's Talk Near Death online community, which is found at www.letstalkneardeath.com. Membership is free, or you're welcome to upgrade to join the live VIP events, to gain early access to episodes, or to receive extra VIP bonus material. Your support helps me to continue to get episodes out and to help grow the conversation around these types of experiences. But before then, let's talk near death.
And 1 minute I was alive, and the next minute I was very dead. And I stayed dead for 8 minutes. I was floating in this tunnel that was made of light, and it felt three-dimensional. There wasn't anything. There was no floor, no ceiling, no walls. There was nothing. I had no idea where I was.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death, and experiences in between. Today, I'm really looking forward to chatting with Brooke Jones, who's had a very eventful life and also what she describes as a short-lived death. In fact, it was this short-lived death that led Brooke onto her quest to prove that her near-death experience had actually taken place. She got much more than she bargained for, and she's had her fair set of challenges along the way. Following an extensive career as a stand-up comedian and as a radio personality, Brooke has now released her book, Why Are There Monkeys? And Other Questions for God. So Brooke Jones, welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. It's fabulous to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kirsty. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk to the future, because where you are, it's a day ahead of where I am. So you're talking to the past, I'm talking to the future. Talk about spooky experiences.
I know, but we're going to meet somewhere in between. Just do not ask me for the lotto numbers.
Oh, darn. That was going to be my first question.
Yeah, I get that one quite a lot. Okay. You've had quite a journey. I know a little bit of your background. Take us back. How did this short-lived death take place? What was going on for you in your life at that time?
Well, first of all, it was 1975. And I had never even heard of a near-death experience. I don't know if Dr. Moody's book had even been released yet, but I certainly hadn't read it or heard anything about it. And I'm a child of the 60s. With people like me, drugs are a part of our daily diet. And I overdosed on this one particular occasion in 1975. And 1 minute I was alive, and the next minute I was very dead. And I stayed dead for 8 minutes and never have heard of a near-death experience. None of what I was experiencing was familiar in any way to me. It wasn't like I'd heard other people talking about it or I'd seen interviews on television about it. So this was pretty darn mind-boggling to me. But there I was. First, it was like I was floating in this tunnel that was made of light, and it felt three-dimensional, but it didn't really feel like floating. It felt like I was being cradled by this warm light that seemed to breathe. It was very strange. And then all of a sudden I wasn't moving. I was standing, but I don't know what I was standing on because I couldn't see anything. I mean, there wasn't anything. There was no floor, no ceiling, no walls. There was nothing except this kind of warm, I want to call it a fog, but it wasn't like any fog I've ever seen before. And this really warm light. And I felt embraced by it. And I had no idea where I was. And I didn't see or hear anybody or anything. So I called out in case there was somebody somewhere. And I just wanted to know where I was. Hello, hello, hello. And then I heard a voice. And I say I heard a voice, but I didn't really hear a voice. the voice that was speaking to me, first of all, it was the deepest, richest, warmest voice I have ever heard. Sort of made Darth Vader sound like Mickey Mouse by comparison, but it was warm and fatherly and gentle. And I didn't really hear it. I felt it. The voice vibrated in every cell of my being. So I more felt the voice than heard it. And finally, I knew where I was, and I knew that the voice belonged to God. And I didn't really believe in God. But there I was having a question and answer session with God. And that's what I did. I asked, can I ask questions? And the voice said, absolutely. What would you like to know? So I asked every question I could think of. And I was given the answers. And it was a remarkable experience, unlike anything I have ever experienced before. And why I was brought back, I don't really know. Was it the final question that I asked? Because that question was a question that had never even crossed my mind before. But all of a sudden, I knew that there was only one more question that was going to be allowed to me. I wanted to make it a good one. So I thought, and I thought, and I thought, and I thought. And then all of a sudden, there was one question that was burning in my soul to ask. It was the only question I wanted to ask. And it was a question I had never, ever even thought of. And I asked it. And the next thing I knew, I was alive. And it took a while because I'm a journalist. I didn't really believe that what happened had happened. I thought maybe it was a drug hallucination. And I wouldn't tell anybody about it. I didn't talk about it to anybody because before I was going to make a complete fool out of myself, I wanted to know that it had really happened. You know, the expression, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it. I was given proof that nobody could deny. So my divine experience, it really happened. It took me a while. I had a bunch of living to do, and I had to figure out how my experience was going to impact my life. And then I was diagnosed with cancer, and life got a little more complicated, but finally I wrote it down and it became a book. And that book was just published on February 9th. And it's this book.
Oh,
Why Are the
congratulations.
And Other Questions for God. Thank you. It's not a long book. And people are saying amazing things about it. But the first thing that I learned in my near-death experience was that God has a sense of humor. I don't know why that shocked me. I mean, have you ever seen a platypus? Obviously, God has a sense of humor. But I had always heard that God is the King of Kings, this judge, this harsh, fear-inducing being striking lightning bolts out of the sky. And that's not who I met. Who I met was a warm, kind, gentle, funny father. I didn't see him. He said that his appearance could be harmful. And I said, harmful? Hello, I'm dead. Harmful, sort of a moot point. But I never did see him, but I felt him. And as for gender, let's just say God is not binary. You work on that yourself, but it's explained in the book. But the first thing I learned is that God has a sense of humor. And I, for whatever reason, I was standing on, I don't know what, talking to God, and I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't terrified. I didn't roll into a ball and cover my ears and whimper. I wasn't the least bit frightened. And after I came back, I didn't know why I wasn't. Shouldn't I have been terrified? But I thought about it, and I thought, okay, God, he can be anything. I can't come to his level. So he came to mind. And is it conceivable that Robin Williams can be a funny, warm father figure, but God can't be? That makes no sense. So my conclusion was God met me on my level and presented himself to me in a way that was not threatening, but was warm and loving. And isn't that what God is supposed to be? That's who he was for me.
Mm. Wow. Well, that's amazing. When you first came back and you said, I should have been terrified, was there some, like you said, you weren't terrified. What was going on for you? Was there a residue that came back that allowed you to just sort of be in that presence for a bit longer? Was it a shock to be back here? What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, when I first came back, I didn't really believe that it had happened. I thought it was a drug hallucination. And as I said, I'm a journalist. I wanted proof. I needed hard and fast evidence before I was going to believe it or share it. And I eventually was given undeniable proof. And once I had that proof that what I had experienced was real, and that voice that I'd been feeling in me for those 8 minutes on earth was the voice of God, I began wondering, why wasn't I frightened? Shouldn't I have been? And that's when that whole thought process came to me about God met me on my level because I couldn't meet him on his. And why wouldn't he be loving and compassionate and gentle? Mm. So that explained why I wasn't terrified and why I didn't roll myself up in a ball and whimper, because God is God and he can do anything he wants. They want. The pronoun issue is interesting, but it's in the book. But I finally came to terms with why wasn't I terrified? And the reason was because, yes, it was God that I met, and he had no reason to terrify me. He didn't need to. What he needed to do, what he wanted to do, was comfort me and teach me something. And that's exactly what happened.
Amazing. Wow. Gosh, there's a lot in there. The experience itself, had you ever had anything like that before?
No, never. I had in my life, I have had several experiences that I should have not lived through. Many, including the 1994 earthquake in LA. Many that there is absolutely no reason at all why I survived. But I did. And I have chosen to assume that it was because I had an angel living on my shoulder and that I was here for some kind of purpose and I was saved from situations that would have otherwise killed me. Other than that, no, I have never had any kind of experience like the one I experienced when I died.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And then you're in this experience, you've got the voice, which we're calling God. You're starting to ask questions. Like my mind, I go into overdrive even just doing these interviews. How did you even come to the point where you could form a question? There's so much we want to know. And then the second part of that is, did you retain that information? Were you able to remember the questions and the information when you woke up again?
At one point during my question and answer session with God, I asked if he could provide me with a pen and some paper.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He laughed at me and I said, my memory's not very good. He said, don't worry, I'm writing this on your soul.
Wow.
I didn't understand it until afterwards. My book contains an exact word-for-word transcript of everything that happened, every question I asked, every answer I got, because he had, in fact, written it on my soul.
Oh, my goodness. That's amazing.
I can't remember what I had for dinner last night, but I remember everything that happened to me when I was dead.
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's something that a lot of experiencers say, is just how real the experiences feel, how the memory of them is so, so vivid. And yet, like you say, we can't remember what we had for dinner last night or what we had for breakfast this morning. And so these are very vivid memories come through. They come back with us. Sometimes we're allowed to remember things, sometimes we're not. So I find it very interesting that you have it all. It's in your book. What sort of questions were you asking? Am I allowed to find out more information about the questions?
Sure. Am I allowed to read some of the book to you?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I think I can answer your last question by reading one part in particular, but I got to put my glasses on because otherwise I can't see it.
That's okay.
I intentionally had the book printed in 14-point type. Most books are done in 12-point. But people my age, who I'm assuming are the biggest demographic for this book, our vision isn't what it used to be. So I wanted to do everything I could to help. So I made the type a little bit bigger than usual. But okay, let me see. Okay, this is this is going to cause some consternation, but this is the book. Remember, the book is called Why Are Monkeys and Other Questions for God? Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is called Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Oh my. Jesus, Allah, and Yahweh. It seems everyone is on a first name basis with God. You'd think with all these religiously minded people running around, we'd be able to coexist in peace. Yet the battle rages and the war cry persists, my way or the highway. But which way is his way? Is there only one way? And if so, which way is it? There are Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Jews. There are cow worshippers and tree worshippers and witch worshippers. But which worshippers are right? Is there only one true religion? And if there is, what is it? That's what I want to know. So that's what I ask. And he answers, I am. That, of course, inspires me to ask which religion he is. And he tells me, I am no religion. Okay, but wait, there's more. When asked to discuss the difference between Christians, Jews, and Hindus, for example, he says that all men are equal in his eyes, and the labels they choose to place upon their beliefs are meaningless to him. In other words, God is the one true religion, but he is no religion. And a man's religion has nothing whatever to do with God's relationship with that man. This will come as quite a shock to a few billion people. Religion is a man-made concept, he explains. It is a collection of rites and rituals, dogmas and edicts, all invented by men in an attempt to control other men. It has nothing whatsoever to do with me. I know I hear it, but I want to be absolutely certain that I understand it correctly. So I ask him, did you just say that religion has nothing to do with God? Yes, that is precisely what I said, and that is precisely what I meant.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I can imagine, because you said that you went into the experience with you were with a God that you didn't necessarily believe in or have a connection with.
Right.
Was there any element of fear? And what you've just read, I can imagine, would be quite comforting, since there wasn't the previous connection or relationship with a belief system.
Yeah. Well, I go back again to, I didn't so much hear him as feel him, which is a whole different thing. His voice, it resonated in every cell of my body, and it didn't feel challenging. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt comforting. I felt safe. I felt like I was in the presence of the most secure, safe embrace in existence. There wasn't even room in my mind to think of being afraid, because the energy, to get airy-fairy here, the energy that was all around me was nothing but loving and kind and gentle.
So what was going on a physical, I know it's not really a physical experience, but what was it like around you? You talked about this tunnel, how you said you were standing, but you weren't really standing. Were you in a place of light? What were you seeing?
I was standing upright, but I don't know what I was standing on, because I didn't see anything, but I was in a totally vertical standing up position. And there was nothing to see. There was nothing. It's just it's really hard for me to explain this because it isn't like anything I have ever experienced before. It's just, I was in an environment that completely enveloped me with a sense of belonging and tenderness and safety. And that's all there was this energy embracing me. I know that's a pretty poor answer, but it's the only one I got.
That's okay. These things we can't put into words, we can't describe. We talk a lot about the void, and I actually experienced the void myself in my near-death experience. But that was a place of nothingness. Was this a place of nothingness? Was there any light? Was there anything?
The presence that was embracing me, it wasn't dark. It was light. It wasn't a blinding light, but it was a comforting, gentle, soothing, sort of pulsating a little bit. I'm struggling. I'm a writer and I'm struggling for words.
That's okay. That's okay. Because there probably isn't a word.
It wasn't a nothingness at all. It was more of everything you could possibly need was right there. It was just, I felt completely cared for and protected and surrounded by love. It's the best I can do. Maybe if I was a painter, I could paint it, but I can't even draw stick figures well. So, I have to just try explaining that I was surrounded by an energy that was light and warm and tender and caring. And there was no place in my head or in my surroundings to trigger a fear response, because the only energy that I was feeling was love.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then you come back. You said that you were dead for 8 minutes.
Yes.
How do you know that? Were there people that verified that, or how do you know that it was 8 minutes?
Yes, there were 2 people with me, and they knew from the minute I lost consciousness till the minute I came back that it was 8 minutes, and they knew I was dead.
Gosh, they must have been terrified.
Oh, they were. I was living in an apartment that didn't even have a telephone, didn't have a television. There was nobody to call, and they didn't really want to anyway because it was drug involved. So they sort of took it upon themselves to try and save me. But yeah, they knew 8 minutes passed between the time I went bye-bye and the time I took my first breath and was alive.
Okay. So you've woken up, you've had this experience. You then go on to pursue, to find proof that this experience actually happened. How on earth do you do that? How do you start to prove the questions, the answers you got were real, that it actually took place?
I don't know how other people do it. And all I can say without giving away a really integral part of the book is that I wanted proof. I'm a journalist. I wasn't going to share my experience with anybody. I wasn't going to talk about it with anybody unless I could know in my heart of hearts that it was real. Mm-hmm. And my wanting it to be real, how do I do this? I had an experience that turned out to be verbatim, word for word, an experience that he had told me had happened to a young woman. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, and this was 4 months after I came back. And all of a sudden, the word for word experience that he had told me about, I suddenly experienced, but I didn't remember him telling me it. I didn't remember any of that. Mm. And then all of a sudden, it happened to me. I said word for word what he said the woman had said. I don't think there's any way for me to do this except to tell you. Okay. I had asked him, we were talking about belief. Wait a second. Can I read something to you really quickly?
Absolutely.
Okay. We were talking about the nature of belief and faith and what is it. And he told me faith is the belief in things not seen, and one has faith the instant that one decides to have it, he said. In other words, having faith is just a matter of deciding to have faith. Well, that certainly sounds easy. If faith is a belief in things not seen, and God is one of those unseen things, in order to believe in God's existence, all one has to do is make a conscious decision to have faith in God's existence. I see, I said, not at all certain that I see. Mm-hmm. Sensing my uncertainty, he adds, one need not be certain that I exist in order to discover that I exist. Many have come to me while unconvinced of my existence. And that led us to a conversation in which I said, how can someone come to you if they don't know there is a you and they don't know where to go looking? And he explained, you don't have to look anywhere. All you can do is stand still. I come to you. And I said, well, how can someone who doesn't believe in you come to you? And that's when he told me a story. He told me a story of a woman who pretty much thought she had everything in life until one night when she sort of fell apart and realized that she had something missing. She didn't know what, but it was something crucial. And she fell to her knees and did something she hadn't done since childhood. She prayed and she said, I don't even know if you exist, but if you do, please come into my life and help me, because I've been calling all the shots and all I've ever done is pretty much make a dog's breakfast out of everything. So if you really exist, would you please help me and come into my life? And he was telling me this story. And he said that the next day, we've got a kitten jumping up on the table. The next day she went to work and suddenly realized half into her work day that she hadn't said a single rude, crude, or lewd word. And this woman's vocabulary was rife with 4-letter words. She couldn't utter a sentence without 3 or 4 not nice words in them. And all of a sudden, 6 hours had gone by and she hadn't said a single curse word, not one. And she looked herself in the mirror and she looked like her, but something really felt different. And all of a sudden she said, holy sh. It felt like an angel had grabbed her tongue and she couldn't finish the word.
Wow.
And I said, how does not swearing have anything to do with you? And he said, she asked me to come into her life and I chose to prove to her by giving her something that she could not possibly take credit for. 4 months after I came back, I went to my office and I was working and I had a pretty high stress job. And by noon, suddenly occurred to me I hadn't said a single rude word, and that's not me. And I looked in the mirror and I looked like me, and I all of a sudden said, holy sh. Felt like an angel. It grabbed my tongue. Oh! And that's when I remembered the story.
Wow.
Everything he had said, he was telling me about me in a way that something that had not yet happened without telling me it was going to happen. And then it happened. And no, there's no way I could take credit for not swearing. I had tried many times in my life to clean up my language, and I had never succeeded. And all of a sudden, I was incapable of saying a rude word.
Wow.
And that's how I knew that after I had fallen to my knees and said those same words, a friend had asked me to go to a church with him on a Wednesday night. I didn't do church. And he said, no, it's not church. It's a music concert. I said, oh, concert. Okay, cool. So we went to this church. It was standing room only. And there was a guy and a girl playing guitar and making beautiful music, not churchy music, just really pretty music. And it was standing room only. And I was standing up against a back wall. And about a half an hour into the concert, my knees sort of buckled and I slid down the back wall and started to weep. And I heard myself say, God, I don't even know if you exist, but if you do, would you please help me? Because I've been calling the shots all my life and all I've done is pretty much, messed up. And if you could help me, I would really appreciate it. And then the next day, I couldn't swear. And then I said, I felt like an angel was holding my tongue, and all of it came back to me. And I realized that the entire experience I had had that night at the church and that day in my office was exactly what he had told me 4 months ago when I was dead. And I couldn't take credit for it. And that's how I knew that it was real. It had really happened. And he proved it to me in a way that I couldn't possibly take credit for.
Amazing that it happened as well in a church after you've just read recently that chapter about how religion, he was saying that religion wasn't part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So what was your gut instinct? Was it to go back to the church? Was it to pursue God as a different being?
I didn't really, this was all so new to me. And I felt like I needed some kind of guidance. I knew that I wanted to model myself after everything that I had been taught, but I didn't know how to do that. I did happen to know some people, some radio friends, who were self-described born-again Christians. And all I knew about their life was that they actually walked the walk, not just talked the talk. And they didn't judge people, and they were compassionate, and they were kind, and they were gentle. And I thought, that looks good. I like that. I went back to that church where the concert was, and I met the pastor of the church and told him I wanted to be baptized. I don't know why, but I just felt like that was something I should do. I was flailing. I didn't really know. So on Easter Sunday of 1976, in the Pacific Ocean, just south of San Francisco, I was baptized. And then I joined my friends in their Wednesday Bible study class. And I read the Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, religiously, so to speak. And then I started, big mistake, watching Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and Jim and Tammy Baker, and what they were saying had nothing to do with what I had been taught. These were people who were saying, if you're a good Christian and you're saved, you will give me your money. And I said, that's not right. And I got really turned off by the entire evangelical movement because of people like that. They were full of judgment. They weren't inclusive. They weren't compassionate. They weren't filled with love. They were the antithesis of everything that the God I met was all about. So I moved from that group of people and just started walking a path of, I'm going to follow the teacher I met when I was dead. I am going to feel my way through this world and trust that love and compassion and kindness and truth were what love and God was all about. And if you profess to me that you are a godly person and yet you say, that's not saved, you're damned to hell, then I don't want anything to do with you. And the God you're talking about isn't the God I met. And I've just been walking that path ever since. And I don't refer to myself as a religious person. I refer to myself as a spiritual person. And people who are spiritual, whether they are avid students of Jesus, who, after all, was a teacher, I can see it in their life. It shows in what they do, not just in what they say. I don't care whether you profess to follow Allah or Jesus or Yahweh. It makes no difference. It makes no difference to him. It certainly makes no difference to me. What matters to me is what you show me. How do you treat people? Are you loving? Are you judgmental? Is the world made of us's and them's? You show me who you are, and that tells me everything I need to know about you. And that's how I live.
Exactly. Is that the biggest message that you think you got out of this?
One of them. I got several. I got several. But yeah, that's a big one. So far, almost everyone has said the same thing, that they hear God in the pages of this book, and it touches them in their deepest, deepest heart. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's opening up the conversation, isn't it? And so for me, that's definitely a plus. That's a huge thing that I feel part of the conversation is to open it up, to actually be able to discuss these things. And we've all got different perspectives. We've got different views. We've got different upbringings, cultures, influences, experiences that we've had ourselves. And it's about respecting each other in love along the way. I want to backtrack a little bit. Your experience, 1975, the term near-death experience wasn't out there. What was it like for you when you first heard of someone else who had had a near-death experience?
It's funny. I remember when it happened. I was walking through my home, through the living room, and the television was on, and there was a talk show. And I was busy doing something. I think I was getting ready to go to the radio station. And it was, I don't remember whose show it was, but on the show were people who had had near-death experiences. And that was the first time I had ever heard of it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard anybody tell a story, anything like mine. And I froze. And I ran into the living room and I sat down and I watched the whole show. And there was a panel of 3 or 4, 5 people, each of them swearing that they had died and they met God or something like God. And they had an experience, and there was a tunnel and there was light and blah, 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 like that. Each of their experiences was different. It wasn't exactly like mine at all. But the fact that anybody had died, met God, and come back was news to me, because I thought I was the only one. So that was sort of comforting. I felt a little less crazy, and a little less of a burden, because once I knew that it had really happened, to feel like something like that had really happened to me, but to nobody else, that was a burden I didn't really want to have to carry. So when I found out that there were other people who had been through a similar experience, I felt very relieved. Like, okay, I don't have to carry this weight all by myself. There are other people who have done something like this. And I was really glad. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does, because learning that for starters, you said I wasn't crazy. That's a huge part of the picture, isn't it? When you first hear about the term, when you've had an experience yourself and you're going, oh, there's someone else out there. Very comforting, very assuring. Yeah. And I guess that probably changed everything going forward, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
You said that you went through breast cancer.
Yes.
So when you had that, what was your reaction to that? Because you said that you've nearly died quite a few times. You've been quite close to the brink. And then now you've got this illness, which is potentially life-threatening. Yeah. You've had your near-death experience at that point. What's going through your head? Are you angry? Are you wondering if this is the end? Are you blaming God?
I remember the day that, first of all, it was breast cancer. I found the lump. I went to the doctor and they found 2 other lumps, and it was late stage advanced breast cancer. And I was told over the phone. And if you saw the video on my website, you saw that part. I had no real reaction when I was told, Brooke, you have cancer. I wasn't angry. I wasn't frightened. I didn't say, why me? Which those three things are the most common responses people have to, hello, you have cancer. I didn't have any of those responses. At no time, and as I said, my cancer was advanced. There was a pretty good chance I wasn't going to survive. At no time was I ever afraid or angry. I never said, why me? And I just felt like I'm covered. However this turns out, I'm covered. I'm okay.
Mm.
And I think that had a lot to do with my experience and having met and spoken to God, knowing, first of all, that I have no fear of death because I've already been there. And to this day, I have no fear of death. But also hearing that I have late stage cancer did not terrify me, did not anger me, did not make me say, why me at all. It was like, okay, here's something else I get to experience and learn from. And that's exactly what I did. And I succeeded and I lived and I'm here. And my health is very fragile. My treatment, part of my treatment was done improperly and it permanently destroyed my immune system. So I'm a pretty fragile girl, but I never said, why me? And I never got angry. And I have never cried about it because I know I'm covered. Whatever it is that's going to happen, it's okay. I'm okay with it. Whatever it is, I'm okay with it.
Do you think that we have predetermined things in our lives? Do you think that this was already pre-programmed? And you said that you learned things from it.
You have led me to another part of my book that I wanted to read. Can I? That's
Sure.
so good. We could have scripted this any better. Is there such a thing as fate? I hear myself ask. Fate, he says, is one of man's most clever inventions. It is a tool by which he frees himself of responsibility for his actions. Okay, now we're on to something. Fate is man's get out of jail free card. No, I did not kill your hamster. It was just his time to die, I think to myself. Okay, well, if there is no such thing as fate, then there's no such thing as destiny or predestination or the concept that we're all acting out a script that's already been written. Is that true? I ask. I gave man the gift of free will, he reminds me. What a man does is dictated by what man chooses to do. At every turn, you are free to choose the road you will travel. I do know which choice you will make before you make it, but that is not the same as predestination because the choice is entirely up to you. To summarize, I say aloud, it isn't written in the stars that on such and such a date, such and such a thing is going to happen to such and such a person. Did I just say that? I'm sounding like a blithering idiot here. Well, that just proves my theory. The older I'd grown, the dumber I'd gotten. The progression is now complete. I'm dead and I've become a complete moron. Ta-da. But that's his explanation of I went on and said, with a belief that things happen as they are destined to happen, a man may reason that it makes no difference what he does. In fact, what a man does or does not do makes all the difference. The whole of man's life is determined by man himself. His tomorrows are built on the actions he takes today. With each choice he makes, he charts the course of his own life. That's one of the many things that I learned.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a very big topic. It's a never-ending conversation, I feel. Yes, very interesting. I look forward to finishing up my reading of your book. The title, Why Are There Monkeys? Why are there monkeys?
That's chapter 3.
Is that a question you actually ask God?
It absolutely is. I asked him if I could ask about evolution, and he said, sure. What would you like to know? And I said, well, according to Darwin's theory of evolution, monkeys evolved into people. And if that's true, why are there monkeys? Shouldn't they all have become people by now? And God laughed, and he said, I asked Charles Darwin that very question when he came here. And what did he say? And God said, his exact words were, why do you think I called it a theory? The theory of evolution. And then God went on to explain evolution and creation, and they are not mutually exclusive because everything that is created evolves, and everything that evolves was created. They are not mutually exclusive. And that was why the title, Why Are There Monkeys? And Other Questions for God.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one. I had always wondered if Charles Darwin said that, monkeys turned into people, there shouldn't be any more monkeys, right? No? Yes? Me? That's what I thought.
Maybe.
I don't know, but that's what I thought. But then he went from telling me what Charles Darwin had said, why do you think I call it a theory, into a discourse on evolution and creation, and that both exist.
Yep. Well, certainly some really big questions there. Like I said earlier, I think if I was in front of God and I was asking questions, I'd just go into overwhelm. I wouldn't know what to ask. I really wouldn't.
I think it has a lot to do with, again, energy. The energy that I was surrounded by so put me at ease, was so non-threatening, so completely non-threatening, that I was actually able to think about, what do I want to know? Who killed JFK? What are the real words to Louie Louie? Well, how do dolphins not drown when they sleep? All kinds of questions were like bumper cars in my head. And then I had to narrow it down to, okay, I'm probably only going to have a certain amount of time to do this. So let's ask questions that are really important. So I focused, and, as you know, in my background, I'm a journalist, but the best, most amazing interview I have ever conducted happened after I died.
Yeah.
And I found myself interviewing God.
Whoa, exactly. Brooke Jones, thank you so much. We're going to put the link to your book in the show notes so people can go and check that out. It is very, very interesting. I think your questions are very unique. I think they're really well done because, like I said, I'd probably go into some form of stage fright. Brooke Jones, it has been wonderful to have you on here to share your experience, share your story. And I love that it's so much more than just the experience, how it's got the ongoing part afterwards where you're trying to find the proof of it happening. You'll walk into spiritual things, into religion, to beliefs, to evolution, into all these different fields. I think it's so, so interesting. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. And we wish you the absolute best going forward.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. You stay safe.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, and I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon.